Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 970 for September 18th, 2022. Coming up in a few minutes.
Can a single malt distillery, not a gin distillery, not a rum distillery, a single malt distillery, can that be established and operated successfully as a social enterprise and be a core part of bringing about the change that we all want to see? I mean, that's some proposition.
Construction work is underway on the Cabrach Distillery in the Speyside region of Scotland. The Cabrach is a remote part of the Speyside area, and the Cabrach Trust hopes to use the profits from distilling to fund affordable housing in the area, along with creating jobs and generally reviving the Cabrach. This week on WhiskyCast In-Depth, I'll talk with Cabrach Trust CEO Jonathan Christie and longtime distiller Alan Winchester, who's serving as an advisor on the project. We'll also hear from Stoli Group CEO Damian McKinney. Work is finally underway on Kentucky Owl Park in Bardstown, and McKinney expects Kentucky Owl to become an even bigger part of Stoli's business worldwide.
I was in Nairobi 2 weeks ago in Kenya, and we've got Kentucky Owl there now, and we're going to have it in Tokyo, and we're going to have it in Amsterdam.
The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
You know, people always ask me, does Redbreast go better with ice or without? Would it go well with figs, dark chocolate, apple crumble? Is there one particular thing I should enjoy it with? I tell them, yeah, other people.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
Gabriel Cardarella here with Dewar's Whiskey, inviting you to enjoy this episode of WhiskyCast with a glass of Dewar's, the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in history.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Delmore. The Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame inducted its class of 2022 this week at a ceremony in Bardstown. Julian Van Winkle III, Andrea Wilson of Michter's, Kava Zamanian of Rabbit Hole, the late Stephen Thompson of Kentucky Artisan Distilling, retiring Congressman John Yarmouth, and retiring State Representative Chad McCoy were this year's honorees. Thompson was also honored with the Parker Beam Lifetime Achievement Award for his years of service to the industry. Angel's Envy has named its first master distiller since the death of co-founder Lincoln Henderson. Owen Martin is leaving Stranahan's in Colorado to join Angel's Envy starting next month. Meanwhile, it didn't take long for retired Angel's Envy co-founder Wes Henderson to find something to keep him busy. He's been working with Blackened American Whiskey's Rob Dietrich on a new expression of the Metallica-backed whiskey. The Blackened by Wes Henderson Bourbon is the second release in Blackened's Masters of Whiskey series. It's finished in white port casks and goes through the sonic enhancement process that was created by the late Dave Pickerel. Blackened and Metallica are donating a total of $50,000 from this expression to Team Rubicon, a nonprofit group helping to rebuild western Kentucky after last winter's devastating tornadoes. Had the chance to talk with Stoli Group CEO Damian McKinney this week while he was in Bardstown. Stoli's Kentucky Owl Bourbon is out with a new collaboration between blender John Ray and Nagahama's Yusuke Yahisa, as I mentioned last week. McKinney was in Bardstown to launch the new whiskey and update the progress on Kentucky Owl Park. But our conversation starts with Ukraine. Stoli's flagship vodka was renamed after the war in Ukraine started to remove any hints of ties with Russia, and I asked him about the public response since then.
It's still very, very close to my heart and important to us. Secondly, actually, sales are doing really well. I mean, it was, I still remember 26th of February. It'll be etched on my mind, not just the invasion on the 24th, but the image on the 26th of a gentleman pouring Stoli down the drain as he made his sort of, as ever, his one-man protest. And do you know what? When it happened, people said to me, "Isn't this dreadful?" And I said, "No, I'd probably done exactly the same if I was him." I think that what happened I know that what happened on the 24th of February was an absolute travesty. we were very clear where we stood, but we were given the opportunity, fortunately, then to make our case and let everybody know who we really were. Particularly, we're not Russian. We were based in Latvia, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the bigger story, and you asked me how we're doing in sales. I think the bigger story is that our consumers at the end of the day are smart people who believe in a cause. And I think that when we laid out our cause, which was frankly standing up against Putin, I've been to Kyiv. I went and spent time with our partners. We lost tens of millions of dollars, is the honest truth, not in sales, but in cash. Because I think this was one of those moments where if you really believe in something, you have to stand and be counted. We had two factories, one producing the front labels and the other producing the closures, both within 30 miles of the northeast in a place called Sumy. And it therefore meant that they were occupied. And for some time they were under occupation. It meant we had a problem. The easy thing for me and the team would have been, well, let's just move elsewhere. Let's find it elsewhere. To be honest, I spoke to the leaders of those businesses and said, we're not going to abandon you. We're going to stand by you. It's going to cost us, but we're not going to do this. Unfortunately, you remember there was a pushback in the northeast. They are now back in Ukrainian hands. They took a while to get to obviously come back online. They're now fully online, and bless them, it's 24/7 trying to catch up. But for me, it's one of those magic moments where you stand and be counted. It'll all work out. Our sales are fine, are good. But I think the bigger point here is that I think that we can hold our heads up high and say we're doing the right thing, and we'll continue to do the right thing by Ukraine.
I know you're here to talk about Kentucky Owl. How important is this bourbon brand in the overall picture for Stoli Group?
Yeah, it's really important. It's really, really important. It's important for a number of reasons. One is it's important because we've pivoted as a company, as you may know, to becoming much more an ultra premium. And I don't think you get much more ultra premium than Kentucky Owl, made in Kentucky by the very best blender in John Ray. Secondly, it's clearly a very valuable brand. But I think thirdly, and we'll probably get onto that conversation, is I and the team are really trying to drive this whole message around global and collaboration, and how do we take the best to the world? How do we share? And I think the Kentucky Owl is doing that in spades. I mean, we were a small brand, honestly, a year and a half ago, a beautiful brand under Dixon, but a small brand. I think in the space of a year, under the leadership of Nick Keane and a few others, and the support of David, and particularly John Ray, I just feel like there's an explosion, and we're suddenly taking it to a very different level.
You mentioned the collaboration. You've done a couple of them now with folks like Louise McWayne and the folks from Nagahama Distillery in Japan. How important is that going to be for you? Very important. I think on two levels. One is, look, I'm a whiskey lover. I've always loved whiskey, and there is something lovely about the essence and the spirit of whiskey, let alone bourbon. But how do you take that to another level? And I think that with Louise McGann, we started, in a way, a revolution. A lot of consumers, and me included, tended to think quite narrowly about, this is a Kentucky bourbon versus a Scotch whiskey or a Scotch malt, etc. I think by bringing to truly the best individuals in the world. I mean, John Ray, I still think is a magician. I don't know how he does it, but he is extraordinary. But imagine putting him in a room with Louise McGann, who is the best bonder in Ireland, and saying, look, of course there's a science, but there's actually a magic to all of this. Could you go away? And here's the secret. The secret is come up with a Kentucky bourbon, but that has the spirit of Ireland. And I can smell it and feel it and taste it. And they've done it. Most people say it's impossible. They've truly done it. And that's why I think it's won the awards that it has. And if we now look at this Takumi, which I've got in front of me now, and I don't know if you've seen it. Sorry, I'm holding it on my chest here. It's another example where somebody said to me, it's impossible. You will never find or never be able to sign up the best
blender distiller, up and coming, passionate, enthusiastic in Japan, with a distillery, so Yahisi-san and Nagami Distillery. You'll never get them signed up. Well, we did, because you go to them with a vision and said, imagine if we put you in the room with John Ray, imagine. And you know what? I can smell and taste Japan in this. But in the champagne of Bourbons, put the two together, and it's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I'm blown away by, again, the artistry of these individuals.
What other collaborations can we expect to see in the coming months?
Oh, lovely. Lots more is the short answer. So we've already got another global collaboration on the stocks, which will come out next year. I think it's unique in a way that we did 2 in 1 year. And that's partly because of COVID. Next year, so we're going to get into the habit of an annual global collaboration. Definitely it's going to happen. I think the other promise, and it's what I said to Dixon when we first got together. I said the tragedy of, in a sense, of the small batch, small quantities, was that we were keeping it within the confines of Kentucky, it seemed to me. And what I wanted to do was, how do I really share this amazing liquid and liquids with the world? So one thing is the input. The other one is the experience. And I was in Nairobi 2 weeks ago in Kenya, and we've got Kentucky Ale there now, and we're going to have it in Tokyo, and we're going to have it in Amsterdam. So I think for me, is it really important? Are we going to do more of it? Yes. And then I think you then combine that with the distillery that's coming around the corner, and wow, this is exciting, very exciting.
Let's talk about that distillery. It's been almost 5 years since the original plans were announced for Kentucky Owl Park. What's the status as we speak right now?
Mark, it's a great question. And when I stood up in front of everybody last year, I said, we're going to do this. We're really going to do this. We've had a lot of work over the year, in particular around the drafting, the architect drawings. We started clearing the site, and we're going out to the site later today, and we will start to build what we're calling the temporary visitor center next month, and it'll be in place by April next year. And the intention then is, and by the way, if you ever got out to the sites, it's an there is something about when you look at something in life and you think, wow, it's just an old quarry, there's nothing you can do here. And this is where our founder, Yuri, I think, has got extraordinary vision. If you go out there now, I don't know if you've been out there, Mark, recently, it is spectacular. The quarries are full. There's 3 big quarries and 3 small pools, full of water. There's geese landing, the woods around it. So our intention then is put the visitor center in, which is going to be absolutely beautiful and stunning, such that not only can we actually share what we're doing with Kentucky Ale with the consumers, but they're going to actually see from the ground up the building of these beautiful pyramids as they start to take shape. So all it's literally imminent now. We're moving to the next stage.
When do you expect to have the next phase open?
Well, the visitors park will be open visitor center be open by the end of April next year, and then the pyramids will start to go up, and then really it's another year and a half before we see them operational.
What will this mean to you to actually be able to control your own source of supply?
A lot. As we all know, liquid is hot. Bourbon liquid is hot, and to actually have our own liquid will make a massive difference, obviously, from a security of supply. But there is another piece to this, is that sustainability really is important to us. And I'm not saying that others aren't doing it in that way, but to actually know that liquid, from the very moment it's born, so to speak, that we've really, really built this sustainability and this approach into how it's I think will also add a little extra magic to it.
How much of a role did the pandemic play in delaying this?
Yeah, of course it did. It did, in many respects. I mean, I think there was one of those, I think like everybody, there was a degree of caution. We had to pull back a bit. We had to be cautious. You've got to make sure the foundations of your base business are working. I also don't think, in all honesty, I don't think we were ready, because you need the brand as well. We're not building a commercial distillery. we're building an experience. And therefore, as much of that was about making sure the brand was also in a good place so that the two sort of synergistically work together. And I think now we're at that place. And in a sense, maybe the pause was a good thing. I'm a great believer in fate.
Anything else you can add I didn't ask about?
You've done very well, Mark. Look, I think if there's a kind of, we're in the ultra premium business, and if there's a sort of pointed end of the spear, I think Kentucky Ale is absolutely there. I think that I just feel like we're at the start of something really exciting, and I'm deliberately using the word experience. Somebody said to me the other day, it's all about the liquid. It's all about the liquid. Everything else it's all about the liquid. And I think he's right. I think we have the most extraordinary liquid. Can we share it as part of that experience? So I'm hoping in years to come, when we have the great, the Bourbon Trail, that we are seen very much as part of that, contributing to that, and a key partner in Kentucky, not, frankly, just a business that's clearly loving being part of Kentucky Ale as a brand.
We'll keep following the progress of Kentucky Owl Park as it moves ahead. In other news, Jack Daniel's is back in the motorsports arena. The brand has sponsored stock cars and sports cars in the past and is now moving into Formula One for the first time. Starting next year, the company will be an associate sponsor on McLaren's F1 cars. Look for the logo on the sides of each car. Diageo's Orphan Barrel brand is out with its annual release of Blade & Bow 22-year-old bourbon. The whiskey is matured at the legendary Stitzel Weller Distillery in Louisville and will be available in 14 U.S. states and the distillery's Garden and Gun Club. Ireland's Waterford Distillery is releasing its first peated Irish single malts. The peated Fenniscourt and Ballybannon whiskies come from barley grown on single farms and are peated with Irish peat. They'll retail for $99.99 a bottle each. And Compass Box is out with a new blended scotch. Ultramarine is the first release in Compass Box's Extinct Blends Quartet series. It re-examines classics from the past using mature malts from Kalila and Glendullan, along with grain whiskies from Cameron Bridge and Girvan distilleries, blended with a series of rare pre-blended parcels of whiskey. There's no word on pricing. Finally, Dewar's will be releasing another expression in their line of 8-year-old double-matured blends. French Smooth takes that 8-year-old whiskey and finishes it in apple brandy Calvados casks from France. It'll be available starting next month with a recommended retail price of $24.99 a bottle. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. Whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Our live webcasts return this Friday night, September 23rd. Join us when Dewar's Master Blender Stephanie McLeod will be my special guest. We'll start right at 5 p.m. New York time on the WhiskyCast YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. Louisville's Speed Art Museum hosts its annual Art of Bourbon auction this Thursday night, September 22nd. Sotheby's New York Gallery hosts the Timeless Whiskey Collection auction on Friday. Whiskeys of the World takes place that night in San Francisco, followed by Saturday night in San Jose, California. Whiskey Live Paris kicks off on Sunday and runs through next Monday, and the Liverpool Whiskey Festival is on Saturday as well. Whiskey and Barrel Night is on the 29th in Chicago, and Bonham's has its next auction of rare whiskeys that day in London. McTeers has an auction the next day in Glasgow, Scotland. And the Whiskey Show is September 30th through October 2nd in London. Whiskey Ottawa is September 30th and October 1st in Canada's capital city. If you're organizing a whiskey event, please let us know about it. We'll add it to our searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. It's brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states and 3 continents, and online, too. Visit the new buyvirginiarye.com site for more details, and please drink responsibly.
Dewar's master blender Stephanie McLeod's innate curiosity, combined with her passion for whiskey maturation, cask finishing, and blending, has created some truly incredible expressions for Dewar's Scotch whiskey. It's also earned her 4 consecutive Master Blender of the Year titles at the International Whiskey Competition, making her the first person to achieve such an accolade. Her innovative spirit is the inspiration behind the ultra-premium Dewar's Double Double 32 Year, the highest-rated blended Scotch whiskey in the world with a score of 94.4. So whether you consider yourself a whiskey connoisseur or just want to find an exciting new whiskey experience, consider one of Stephanie's other masterful expressions, including Dewar's 15-year, Double Double 21-year, or Dewar's 8-year Mizunara cask finish, and discover just how rewarding curiosity can be. Enjoy responsibly.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlach and the Classic Malts lineup. The Cabrach lies between Speyside proper and Aberdeenshire in the Highlands of Scotland. It has a distilling history that goes back for centuries, and now there's hope that a new distillery will help restore the Cabrach to economic health. The foundation stone was laid recently for the distillery, which is being built on the Inverherrick farm. Retired Glenlivet master distiller Alan Winchester is one of the consultants on the distillery project, and joined me on a Zoom call, along with Cabrach Trust CEO Jonathan Christie. So how have you been keeping busy since stepping down at Glenlivet?
Well, what have I been doing? I've been doing all the sorts of things that sort of semi-retirements introduced me to, like archaeological studies, which was a continuation of the pioneering spirit that you spoke to Derek Alexander a few episodes about. That's fascinating, and that takes me to the National Trust properties, so that's been interesting. We did have a dig in June after I left, but I volunteered for the National Trust. The Cabrach Distillery, which we'll speak a bit about, is one of the projects. It's actually gathering speed now, so it's a great honour to be involved in that. What have I done? Hey, I went and had a look at the new Brora setup at Brora Clynelish Distillery with the Institute of Brewing and Distilling the other week. Fascinating to see, and I think the way they've tastefully done the reconstruction there is very clever.
And you've been almost as busy in retirement or semi-retirement as you were before, right?
Yes. It's an industry that it's a job given up altogether. It fascinates me, and as we were saying, it's been fascinating to be involved in some of these projects, like the Cabrach Distillery, which I see Jonathan's joined us now.
Let's bring Jonathan into the conversation. Jonathan Christie, the CEO of the Cabrach Trust. Jonathan, tell me about the distillery project.
Really great to be speaking to you. The project as a whole, as Alan, I'm sure, has said, is a really exciting project. It sits at the very heart of the Cabrach Trust's regeneration vision for this community. And I think if anyone knows about the Cabrach community, it's had this incredible history, heritage. It has played host to a community here for hundreds of years, but that community has experienced a steady state of decline for over 100 years now, really exacerbated by the First and Second World Wars, when men and boys went off to war and never returned for various reasons to the Cabrach. So to be leading something now, which is wholly about community regeneration, wholly about doing something for the benefit of others, but doing it through whiskey, just makes for an incredible combination. So the distillery itself is going to be operated as a social enterprise, but it's going to revive what was an absolute art of distilling in the Cabrach, and bring back to market a product which we certainly hope to be very proud of once it's matured.
And the Cabrach has a history in whiskey distilling, right, Alan?
Yes. Yeah, the Cabrach actually occupies that place in the illicit distilling history, which can still be seen up in the hills. They are the remains of the whisky industry. And in that era, the whisky was smuggled to Aberdeen, where it actually received top billing with its illustrious neighbour, the neighbour I used to be involved with. But the areas are quite close together. And there was also Duke of Gordon, who was the landlord for Deagle and Livet. He got his factor to encourage legal distilling in the Cabrach. And there was 3 legal distilleries within the immediate Cabrach. And in fact, the new distillery is just half a mile from the original Cabrach distillery, which was at a farm called Les Mardy. So they were in the early history, but unfortunately, as Jonathan said, things have taken its toll, and a lot of its best exports to the whisky industry was the people to the local distilleries, mainly in Dufton, and our chairman, his family lived in the Cabrach, and they worked and they were very prominent, and of course, and still are in the William Grant's operations.
When will the distillery be ready to go? I know you've laid the cornerstone for it, or the foundation stone. What's the timeline?
So we're amongst a really exciting moment whereby there's a huge amount of substantive activity happening. I was just up on site, so I keep pointing to my right because the old steadings here at Inverharrick are about 50 metres from my office in the farmhouse. So I was just up there this morning, and we're in the middle of a package to really look at the masonry within that 19th century steading. So we're picking and pointing, we're replacing lintels, we are rebuilding sections that need to be rebuilt because 19th century buildings are beautiful, don't quite conform in some places to kind of modern building standards. So we're in the midst of making the 19th century building good. We've already delivered a massive enabling package because the site is stunning. You know, it sits in this high promontory in the middle of the lower Cabrach Basin, looking absolutely otherworldly, but access to it's quite problematic. So we had to create a new junction with the main road. We had to create a new site access that would be fit for cars, coaches, heavy goods vehicles. We had to create a turning head next to the steadings for people to access, and all the parking infrastructure in quite a previously inhospitable setting. We've now created that access. We've been able to move on to looking at the repairs to the building. The aim from here will be we'd like to think that we're within touching distance of 12 months away from first distillation. So that's the ambition that we have. That's the pressure we're putting on ourselves. And the premise to be hitting that first distillation at some point in 2023 is what we're driving towards. And with every week, we're feeling more confident that that's possible, but we can't take our foot off the accelerator at all.
Explain for those who are not familiar with the concept of a social enterprise what you're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a component of the project which is incredibly dear to my heart, to Alan's heart, to our chairman Grant Gordon's heart. The very fact that when this business is up and running, when it's making a profit, when we have mature single malt to sell, all future profits and surpluses will go back into the charitable trust to support community activities and to support that community regeneration mission. So in short, you know, the whole concept is a not-for-profit. It's about supporting the long-term sustainability of the charitable trust and the long-term sustainability of all the projects that we want to take forward on behalf of the Cabrach community. As I said before, the community was once great. The area was renowned. The area is on the edge of being forgotten now. We believe the distillery can be, you know, the lungs of the community's future.
And creating jobs for the community, right?
Absolutely. I think what are the key components of community regeneration? It's a place that people want to visit. They want to learn about. They can access permanent skilled employment, and they can access places to live, raise families, and grow all together. And they're all the parts of the puzzle that we're looking to drive forward at the Cabrach Trust. But as I said, with the distillery serving as the lungs of that ambition, because once it's reached that point of having matured single malt to sell, we move into a position of hopefully being significantly cash generative, and that can really drive the next part of our regeneration projects here.
Which would be?
So, well, Inverhaddock Farm is a strategically very important parcel of land in the Cabrach. It's right at the intersection, 6 miles uphill from Dufton. We've got a junction down towards Aberdeenshire. We've got the high road over to the Upper Cabrach and down into Aberdeenshire. So it sits in quite a strategic place. There's things that we certainly want to do more generally with the farm that we have, which would link to affordable housing, other projects like nature recovery, well-being trails, community events. But again, when we have higher levels of revenue coming through the charitable trust, can we start to consider additional acquisitions? Can we start to consider additional affordable housing? Can we start to consider supporting other projects to take flight, which might be other startup enterprises? So really the ambition is about getting the assets that we have up and running and really singing. And then when they're turning a profit, we can then think about the medium to long-term program of activity.
Alan, explain your role in all this.
Well, I was taken in as an advisor to the distillery, and very proud to be associated that. I've got a directorship in it. And what Jonathan's saying is a local person. Now, I'm not Cabrach. I live in Duftown. As Jonathan says, it's 6 miles away, but it's nearly a world away. But all that things, to me, seemed right for me to get involved in this project. So I'm there to have a look at the historic sort of things. The Trust's already sponsored two marvellous studies on early distilling, and also to look at the distilling techniques and how, when we're speaking about a sustainable traditional distillery, what sort of equipment we're going to use in it, what can we fit into the buildings, as Jonathan's speaking about, where probably a modern distiller would take the bulldozer and knock it all down. But no, we're being true to that. Jonathan was speaking about the stoneworking skills. It is really interesting watching these craftsmen working with what they have, the stones, rebuilding it and using traditional materials. But then we find problems with the original foundations, etc., which always makes a project interesting.
What do you expect this distillery to look like when it's completed?
That's a plan of it in my backdrop there. True to the buildings, you see the local stone, etc. You can see the row of worm tubs there because we're going to use worm cooling in the stills. We're going to have a 3-still setup where we've looked at one of the original Cabrach distilleries that's been archaeologically excavated. And we're looking to, we think that they distilled with 1 still. So we're going to maybe give that I'm not saying think, we're going to give that a try out and see what we can produce with that and see if we can speak to this Cabrach characters that was spirit that was handed down to us.
What was the character of that spirit?
Well, we have references to it very much in the Speyside character of that smooth as milk, that fruity sort of Speyside style. So we'll be looking at playing with these influences and trying to be true to that Cabrach style.
Give me a sense, Alan, give me a sense, as somebody who's grown up around that community, what it means to you as someone coming in from the outside, from Dufton.
Yes, as a Dufton. Well, the beauty of going to the Cabrach is I can cycle to my work, and it's all uphill because Inverhaddock sits round about the 1,000-foot mark. But I think it speaks to that because if you go around the landscape, it's a landscape that should have people in it. It should have things in it. So, this is one of the best. Ushkabea, the water of life, what better way to breathe into a community? We've seen that throughout Scotland. even though we are surrounded by distilleries, this corner of the old Banffshire Murray is just that forgotten bit. So it cries out for this. So again, I feel it's all right. It's all correct for it. It all lines up, I think. And it's fascinating to be involved in taking something back to life. You know, I've been involved in rebuilding distilleries, expanding distilleries, but this is taking something really back from the roots up with a strong sense of history and tradition, but a really positive message looking into the future.
Jonathan, for those who are not familiar, explain what the Cabrach Trust is and what it does.
Great. So the Cabrach Trust is a charitable trust. So we're a registered organisation with the social purpose that sits behind us, front and centre of everything that we do. We were set up 10 years ago by our founder and chairman, Grant Gordon, with the objectives of bringing about the regeneration of the Cabrach. And we do that through a number of ways. We're obviously focused upon the Cabrach Distillery and Heritage Centre, which will really sit at the heart of our project for many, many years to come. But we also do a number of other things. So we continue to farm Inverharrick Farm and to do that in a sustainable way. We've incorporated recently 2 kilometres of all accessible trails for the community near and far to access. So they've got a safe place to enjoy the incredible environment of the Cabrach, the rolling hills, the purple heather, the rivers that kind of wind their way to the sea. We've incorporated within that trail programme 2 nature ponds. We've sown a community wildflower meadow. We've planted over 3,000 native broadleaf trees. We've installed a nature hide on the banks of the River Devon. So we've really created new assets for the community to enjoy. So they can come, they can walk, they can picnic, they can read interpretation boards and understand the history of this place and the people of this place. We have a small community centre that we have responsibility for, and we've launched a really interesting rural skills and traditional crafts programme. So people, again, can visit the Cabrach, can understand the place, but take part in a day's stone diking course, or willow basket weaving, or nature foraging, or working with hot lime. So again, all these very traditional skills that were kind of part and parcel of the community across the centuries that are on the edge of being lost. Part of what we're doing is reviving those skills and giving local people the opportunity to come along and take part in those courses. Another interesting one, which maybe has tentacles into the distillery, is that we've worked with the community over the last 6 months to develop a new Cabrach tweed. So taking inspiration from the landscape, the buildings, the people, what are the colours, the sights, the sounds that really make them think of the Cabrach? And how can we reflect that in a tweed that we're going to develop with a local partner? How can we then use that tweed for things that we might sell in the future gift shop, in the retail space, what you might find our staff to be wearing around their necks or kind of in a gilet. But again, a new part of the Cabrach's identity born through working with the community, but then part of the identity for the distillery in the future. So there's a lot of really interesting projects that we're involved with just now over and above the distillery, but it's all those things combined that in our view will bring about the renaissance of people living, working, visiting the Cabrach again.
How much land does the Cabrach encompass?
Oh, that's a good question. It's an area that's in general terms, probably about 10 miles long by about 8 miles wide. In acres, I'll need Alan to do quick maths on that one. So it's not an insignificant size. It would be like if it was a Hebridean island, it would be a good-sized Hebridean island, but it's landlocked. It used to be this wonderful crossroads between West Aberdeenshire, Speyside, historic Banffshire. You know, that it was the through road for so many people. It's now become a bit of an island when people travel around it as opposed to come through it. So another part of what we're doing is actually bringing people back into the heart of the Cabrach, returning it to be that intersection between the great places of Aberdeenshire, Speyside and historic Banffshire.
So people have probably driven through there without even realising it.
Yeah, most definitely, Mark. Travelling over it, we would just say, oh, we're heading over the Cabrach. That would take us over into Lower Don side, or maybe go up a bit to D side from here. It's notorious for being blocked with snow, the higher reaches of it. It's the 941, but it's usually blocked with snow in maybe 3 months of the year, but we're a wee bit lower off from the summit of the Cabrach, and they're a versatile people at moving about in the snow. They get on with it, so it's there's a good spirit of that as well.
How much fun has this project been?
For me, it's been a lot of fun, Mark. As I said to you, it felt right. I love the attention to detail on it. Everything is well discussed. Everything has to have a place in it. Jonathan joined us last year, was it, Jonathan? And he's brought a big enthusiasm, and the project is moving on at a pace as we've spoken about. It has been spoken about for a long time, but until things were correct and in the right order, each thing has to pass. It's to pass the timelines of the pass, a sort of a checklist in a sense, but great fun and for the right reasons, which I support.
Yeah, this project is incredible. I mean, I every day I feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants because I don't come from the spirits industry. My kind of background is in the charitable sector and working with not-for-profits and things that absolutely have a social purpose that sits behind them. To come into this project, to be able to work alongside people such as Alan, Grant, Forsyths, these organizations who are synonymous, individuals who are synonymous within the industry, is an absolute privilege. But we're on a roadmap now to really proving a theory. No one's really done what we're doing in terms of can a single malt distillery, not a gin distillery, not a rum distillery, a single malt distillery, can that be established and operated successfully as a social enterprise and be a core part of bringing about the change that we all want to see? I mean, that's some proposition, that's so exciting. But to actually be, like I said, within touch and distance of first distillation, that's huge for the trust. It's huge for everyone who's been involved in this project, and it's massive for the community.
He plays himself down quite a bit, Mark. He's a quick learner in making whiskey. So if you said something 6 months ago, he will, and you say something slightly different, he will catch you. So he's good. It's in good hands, I can tell you.
There's a link to the Cabrach Trust website in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's start off with a new whiskey from Heather Green and the team at Milam & Green in Texas. Unabridged was created in collaboration with writers David Wondrich and Noah Rothbaum and is a blend of bourbons from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Texas. It's a cask-strength whopper at 59.1% ABV, and the nose is very aromatic with touches of orange peel, pecan pie, honey, toasted oak, and subtle spices. The taste is anything but subtle, though. It's complex and intense with spicy notes of white pepper and cinnamon, balanced by orange peel, honey, pecans, red apples, and just a hint of chocolate. If you add some water, it opens up the fruity character without hurting the spices, while also bringing out touches of sugar cookies and apple pie and emphasizing the nuttiness. The finish is long with lingering spices and hints of fruits and chocolate underneath. I'm scoring the Milam & Green Unabridged Volume 1 Bourbon a 93. Next up, the Midnight Silky from Ireland's Slieve League Distillers. This one is a blend of Irish single malts finished in a combination of virgin oak and imperial stout casks. It's bottled at 46% ABV. The nose is smoky with notes of black tea, honey, and dried fruits. The taste has a touch of campfire smoke, along with black tea and honey, a hint of lemon zest, peaches, pears, and a touch of chocolate. The finish is long and mouth-coating with a delicate smokiness and hints of sandalwood and dried fruits. I'm scoring the Midnight Silky a 90. Finally, if you're ever offered a chance to taste Glenmorangie's 26-year-old Truffle Oak expression, go for it. It's only available to the distillery's privately selected customers and is bottled at 55.7% ABV. The nose has notes of baked oranges, tropical fruits, honeycomb, hints of figs, dates, plums, and vanilla beans. The taste is spicy with clove, cinnamon, white pepper, and cardamom. Baked oranges add character in the background, along with touches of brown sugar, honeycomb, and dried flowers. The finish is very long and spicy, with hints of oranges and tropical fruits. I'm scoring Glenmorangie's 26-year-old Truffle Oak a 95. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 100-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature, double oak, cask strength, or reserve series rye whiskeys, as well as their line of premium rye whiskey canned cocktails at a retailer near you. Just visit sagamorespirit.com/find-rye. Please drink responsibly.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. Two homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the inbox now for Your Voice, brought to you by Scarabus Islay Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. One more comment on the E or no E spelling debate from last time around. Jerry O'Sullivan at Pogues 1977 tweeted this: after listening to the latest episode of WhiskyCast, I'd say the proper spelling of whiskey is Uskabaha, but the English have forced our hand to their language, so I'll go with whiskey with an E, since I'm Irish. And we had a comment from Alan Wagner-Lamy on our interview with Phil Steger last week. American single malt TTB regulation, ensuring high standards or curtailing creativity. Great convo with Phil Steger from Justice Whiskey on WhiskyCast. And I mentioned Owen Martin during the news with his new job at Angel's Envy. He also heard the interview with Phil Steger and posted this on our Facebook page. There are several things that I believe Phil Steger is confused during the In-Depth segment. I'd be happy to discuss further at some point. Owen, I'd be glad to have that discussion. Let's talk soon. If you have a question, suggestion, or anything else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always find me on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or just email me. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Your Voice is presented by Scarabus, the Islay single malt from Hunter Lang & Company that celebrates all of Islay's natural gifts in one bottle. Only those who seek shall find Scarabus. Start your search at hunterlang.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. Last time around, we explained royal warrants, the sign that a whiskey maker or other company is an official supplier to the British royal family. But what's the difference between a royal warrant and being allowed to call your distillery, quote, royal? Only 3 distilleries have ever been given that status. Royal Lochnagar is the most well-known of the 3, being just a kilometre or so from the royal estate at Balmoral. In fact, there are more golf courses than distilleries with the royal moniker. Royal Brackla is the only other one still producing, and the long-gone Glenury Royal was the 3rd. Royal Lochnagar is also the newest of the three to get the royal treatment. It got the title along with a royal warrant back in 1848 after Queen Victoria stopped by for a visit. Now, it's been almost 175 years since the last granting of a royal name to a distillery, so don't look for a new addition to the list anytime soon. If there is one, it might not even be in Scotland. That's because Dartmoor Distillery in England is located on land owned by the Duchy of Cornwall, which is part of the Prince of Wales's estate. It's known that then Prince Charles took an interest in the distillery's design when planning approval was being sought, as we learned in episode 795 at the end of 2019 from architect Gareth Roberts. Now, it's not likely that Dartmoor would ever get the royal treatment, but one never knows. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copperpot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copperpot.
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, cocktail recipes, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and the email address, comments@whiskycast.com.
Well, folks, we're nearing the end of another great episode of WhiskyCast, which means you're probably craving some whiskey. Head on over to Dewar's.com or your local retailer to discover what makes Dewar's the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in the world.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022. And comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.